On a cold Moscow morning in June 2025, as the city awoke beneath a pale, icy sky, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Inside the Kremlin's fortified walls, a top-secret report sent shockwaves through the highest ranks of Russian power. Not because of the weather, but because of its explosive contents, which threatened to upend everything the Kremlin thought it knew about its closest ally. The document, stamped with the unmistakable seal of the FSB, exposed a sweeping and deeply embedded campaign of espionage, but the spies weren't from the West, as many had long suspected. They were from China, Russia's supposed no-limits partner, the nation it had trusted above all others in recent years. This was no minor spat between allies, it was a profound betrayal that struck at the very heart of the partnership. The report revealed that Chinese hackers had infiltrated Russia's most sensitive government and military networks, stealing secrets once thought impenetrable. Chinese investors, under the guise of cooperation, were mapping out Russia's strategic territories, eyeing resources and infrastructure with calculated precision. And Beijing was quietly siphoning off the crown jewels of Russia's military industry, technology, blueprints, and innovations that had taken decades to develop. For years, Putin and Xi had paraded their alliance on the world stage, declaring unity and mutual trust in their stand against the West. But behind the carefully staged handshakes and public smiles, China was acting less like a friend and more like a predator, exploiting every opportunity. The implications were staggering. While Russia fought the West, its so-called ally was quietly undermining it from within, eroding its strength and independence. Every gesture of support from Beijing now looked like a calculated move designed to keep Russia dependent, distracted, and ultimately under China's thumb. The Kremlin realized, perhaps too late, that it had traded sovereignty for support, and the cost was far higher than anyone had imagined, leaving Russia vulnerable and exposed. The so-called friendship was, in truth, a fragile facade, masking a deep and growing rift. For those who read the unredacted report, the message was chillingly clear. Russia was being hollowed out from the inside, its secrets and strength slipping away. The CCP wasn't just gathering intelligence, it was methodically preparing for a future where Russia would be reduced to a subordinate state, its autonomy, a memory. The partnership that was meant to challenge the West had instead become a masterclass in deception, with China always several moves ahead. China was playing a long, patient game, and the leaked report was only the first glimpse of its ruthless ambition and strategic cunning. The friendship without limits had in reality very clear limits, and Russia now found itself on the wrong side of that line, isolated and betrayed. The Kremlin's trust, once its greatest asset, had become its most dangerous vulnerability, leaving the nation exposed to manipulation. The world saw unity and strength, but inside the Kremlin, Russia saw only the bars of a gilded cage, its freedom slipping away. The chill in Moscow was no longer just the weather, it was the cold, inescapable reality of betrayal, echoing through the silent streets and haunted halls of power. The digital ghost haunting the Kremlin had a name: APT-31, China's elite hacking group. Linked to Beijing's Ministry of State Security, APT-31 led a relentless cyber campaign against Russia. Their targets: the Ministry of Defense, Rosatom, Roscosmos, Gazprom, and Rosneft, pillars of Russian power. Using custom malware and sophisticated phishing, they bypassed even Russia's best defenses. The attacks intensified after 2022, as Russia grew isolated and distracted by Western sanctions. China seized the moment, digging deeper into Russian infrastructure with little fear of reprisal. The goal wasn't just to steal secrets, it was to achieve information dominance. With every breach, Beijing gained leverage, predicting Moscow's moves, exploiting its weaknesses, and ensuring Russia could never pose a future threat. The stolen data fueled China's technological leap and economic advantage. The digital invasion was silent, but its consequences were seismic. In the shadows, China was building supremacy over its northern neighbor. China's ambitions weren't limited to cyberspace. They were moving north, into Russia's Arctic. This new frontier offered opportunities that Beijing couldn't ignore, and the world was beginning to take notice. As melting ice opened up new shipping lanes and untapped resources, China boldly declared itself a near-Arctic state, despite being thousands of miles away. The Chinese government poured billions into Russian projects, eager to secure a foothold in this rapidly changing region. On the surface, it looked like a win-win partnership. China funded ports, LNG facilities, and critical infrastructure, promising economic growth for both nations. But beneath the surface, Chinese research vessels mapped the seabed for potential military use, and many workers had direct or indirect ties to the PLA, raising suspicions about their true intentions. Russian officials grew increasingly wary, warning that these projects were Trojan horses, cleverly disguised for intelligence gathering and paving the way for a future Chinese military presence. China was learning to operate in the harsh Arctic environment, using Russian territory as its training ground and gaining valuable experience for future operations. The economic partnership masked a deeper strategic incursion, one that was slowly shifting the balance of power in the region. By embedding itself in the region, China gained leverage and normalized its presence in Russia's backyard, making its involvement seem routine and unthreatening. Moscow risked losing control of the Arctic, unable to push China out without sacrificing its own economic ambitions and strategic interests. Beijing's long game was clear: turn the northern sea route into an international waterway dominated by China, reshaping global trade and power dynamics. Russia's sovereignty in the Arctic was slipping away, one investment at a time, each project tightening China's grip on the far north. The Russian Far East, vast, resource-rich, and sparsely populated, became another front in China's silent expansion. Chinese companies leased huge tracts of land, developed mines, and built logging facilities, often bringing their own workers and creating isolated communities. To Moscow, desperate for investment, this influx seemed like a blessing. But the FSB warned, this was a strategic takeover by stealth. Chinese operations stripped resources and left little benefit for locals while environmental damage mounted. These economic outposts doubled as intelligence hubs, with agents operating under business cover. Over time, the region grew economically dependent on China, eroding Russian control. Some analysts feared a slow-motion Sinicization, Beijing's influence becoming so dominant that Moscow's authority was only nominal. The Kremlin's public welcome masked deep internal alarm. The Far East was being sold off piece by piece to a neighbor with long memories and longer ambitions. Perhaps the most damaging betrayal in recent history was China's systematic and relentless theft of Russian military technology, a campaign that unfolded quietly over years but left a lasting impact on both nations. For decades, Russia sold advanced weaponry and cutting-edge systems to China, believing it was cementing a powerful partnership and securing a loyal customer for its defense industry. But Beijing was a student as much as a customer, buying, reverse engineering and meticulously copying Russian systems, learning every detail and adapting them for its own use. Chinese engineers dismantled jets and missile systems, supplementing hands-on work with vast troves of data stolen by cyber groups like APT-31 who penetrated Russian networks to extract blueprints and technical secrets. The results were undeniable. China's J-11, J-15 and J-16 fighters, as well as the HQ-9 air defense systems, all bore unmistakable Russian DNA, their designs echoing Moscow's innovations. But China didn't just copy, they improved, integrating advanced electronics, new composite materials, and their own innovations, pushing the technology even further. Russian officials protested, but Beijing ignored them, knowing Moscow was too dependent on Chinese business to cut off sales or risk the relationship. The theft gutted trust between the two defense industries, creating a rift that would be difficult to repair. In effect, Russia was selling the rope China would use to hang its own arms industry, unwittingly fueling its rivals' rise. Short-term cash and quick profits were traded for long-term irrelevance and a shrinking share of the global arms market. The master had become the mark, outmaneuvered by the very partner it once sought to lead. The true cost of partnership was Russia's technological future, as China surged ahead and left its former mentor behind. China's copied and improved weapons weren't just for its own use, they were now flooding the global arms market. Russia, once dominant in Africa, the Middle East and Southeast Asia, found itself undercut by Chinese clones. Nations that once bought Russian jets now turned to China for cheaper, politically unburdened alternatives. Every sale lost was a blow to Russia's economy and global influence. Arms deals create long-term alliances. Now, those ties were shifting to Beijing. China wasn't just selling weapons, it was selling influence at Russia's expense. The Kremlin watched its traditional spheres of influence erode, replaced by China's growing network. The irony was bitter. Russian technology, meant to secure its power, was now used to diminish it. Beijing's strategy was brutally effective, turning Russia's strength into a liability. The global arms race had become a battle against Russia's own shadow. The Kremlin knows the truth. Putin and his circle have seen the evidence of China's espionage, Arctic encroachment, and technology theft. Yet, publicly, Putin praises the unprecedented trust with Beijing because he has no choice. After the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Western sanctions isolated Russia, making China its economic and diplomatic lifeline. China buys Russian oil and gas, supplies critical goods, and shields Moscow at the UN. This dependency creates a massive power imbalance. Putin cannot confront Beijing without risking economic collapse. The CCP exploits this, hacking and copying with impunity. Putin is trapped in a gilded cage, projecting strength but forced into silence. He's traded long-term security for short-term survival. The partnership meant to create a multipolar world is cementing a unipolar Asia, dominated by China. Russia is now a resource-rich, strategically subordinate client state. China's actions are not random, they're part of a grand strategy. The goal: make Russia a loyal vassal, a source of cheap resources, and a buffer against the West. Every cyber attack, every Arctic investment, every stolen secret is designed to create irreversible dependency. China weaves a web of economic control, making Russian independence economic suicide. Technologically, China ensures permanent superiority, leaving Russia a generation behind. Regionally, China replaces Russian influence in Central Asia, the Arctic, and the Far East. The No Limits partnership is a transitional phase, a temporary alliance while China weakens its neighbor. For Beijing, Russia is not an equal partner but a future subordinate. The master plan is unfolding, one calculated move at a time. The Russia-China alliance in 2025 is a cautionary tale. The feared partnership is an illusion, built on convenience for China and desperation for Russia. Behind the smiles, China is winning a quiet, relentless struggle. The CCP sees no allies, only assets and obstacles. The tactics used against Russia, dependency, theft, infiltration, are used globally. Beijing's friendship is often a Trojan horse, advancing its interests at its partner's expense. Russia, caught between a hostile West and a predatory East, clings to a duplicitous partner. The Kremlin believes it can manage the relationship, but evidence says otherwise. The bear has been lured into the dragon's lair, only to find itself on the menu. In this great game, Russia is not China's partner, it is the prize.